On today's episode, we hear how employers shouldn't ask for references when hiring. Learn how someone isn't in it for the money, just all the things money can buy. Find out that we have no shortage of overpaid CEOs. Welcome Snowden to Russia. Find out that homeschooling parents aren't real teachers. And lastly, that real entrepreneurs love regulation. This is Cringe Posts. Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast. This is the show where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes that we find in our feeds. We take them apart, talk about what assumptions were being made and why they're wrong. And of course, we like to have a little bit of a laugh along the way. My name is Donald, and I'm here with my co-host, Britt. Before we make fun of other people, we always like to make fun of ourselves, though, because let's face it, we've all had dumb thoughts, dumb posts, dumb opinions in the past. And so we like to show that you can grow from that. And before we get into that, we're just going to ask you, the usual stuff. If you like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, leave us a review, share, do all the things that help us in the algorithm, because it helps us out a lot and we appreciate it and helps us grow. So without being said, here is a post. And this is early or I guess late 2012. Some wall posting, which I feel like almost never happens unless it's like a birthday these days. So on the and I'm gonna call it the date specifically here. Yes. On the 24th of September 2012, Britt writes on my wall, "You plus me plus Super Smash Bros plus tonight equals ?"
And you commented saying, "Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah. There are two comments. I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then on the 25th of September, 2012, I wrote on Britt's wall, "So nobody named Britt invaded my room for Smash Bros today. A bit disappointed."
Yeah, it's kind of the 10-year anniversary of our friendship in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's super, super funny.
I'm sorry, I flaked out on you, man.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Well, and I'm guessing it says September 25th, but there's not like a timestamp. I'm wondering if that's like at midnight or like 1 a.m. or something, and that's why it's the 25th rolling over.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah, which is just so funny. Britt, what gives, man? What gives? Why were you scared?
I just, I was one of the, maybe. I mean, you and your brother David were just fantastic at that. But to be fair, I think we might have been playing Brawl. I don't think we were playing. So that's its own cringe for itself.
That's probably true.
I think we were playing Brawl, man. I don't think the Melee thing really, or the Project M thing really took hold until like 2013.
Yeah, I was going to say this would have been a little bit too early. I remember when we were all playing PM, but I don't think it was right at the start of NU. We definitely played a ton of PM.
And what's funny is I didn't like Brawl. Like I'd only ever played Melee because I didn't have like the new one, and so I was like, this feels weird, and I'm not very good at it. But that's not the reason I didn't go play with you. It's because I was just a flake, and I probably wouldn't have hung out with someone else. I'm sorry.
That's okay, man. We're making up for it now. See, now you need to get a Melee on your computer, and we'll play online because Melee is the better one. So,
absolutely.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll move on to our first cringe post of this episode, and this one reads: "Employers asking for references is so stupid and pointless. Like, why don't you give me 3 references? Go ahead. Let me call 3 former employees and see if y'all treated them well or like crap. Then we'll talk." And the funny thing is, actually, things like this exist. Like services like Glassdoor or any other of these employer review workplaces, they totally exist. And so you totally have the option to do that. And it's funny because there's this entitlement mentality like, no, you know what? I need to verify you. And it makes me think of the Rick and Morty scene with like Jerry. Well, I'm leaving. You could always do that. Well, what if I need references from you? It's like, you could always do that. Just go and look. And it's so funny because it's not stupid and pointless. Unless the references that you list are not good references, which generally speaking, if you're hiring, as an employer and you want to hire an employee and you're asking for references and you see that they're listing, you're listing your best friend and your parents and, maybe your college buddy. Like that's not that, that there aren't going to be very objective, resources there. So it's maybe not worth a lot. But if you're listing very reasonable people, like maybe a former manager in another job, or maybe like a college professor if you're just out of school. People who are actually going to have these ways that to measure your value. If they speak highly of you, that speaks a lot to your ability to be hired. So it's not pointless at all. I think people can make it pointless if they want it to be pointless, but for those people who have demonstrated their value and their abilities and their energy to be a good student or be a good worker or whatever the case is, be a good volunteer, when you do that, these references are a great way to be rewarded for that, and it's a great way for an employer to know, am I making a worthwhile investment in hiring this individual?
Yeah, the all purchasing decisions, whether you are purchasing, someone being able to do labor for you, or purchasing a product, are based on information, including investment decisions. That's probably more apt comparison, in that when a company hires you, they're making an investment, because they're not going to necessarily make a profit off of your labor for a bit, because you got to train and ramp up and all this stuff. So it's pretty significant. They're going to invest at least $10,000 over a 3-month period to get you up and rolling. And it's all about information, what information you can gather, right? In both sides of the transaction. So the employer, when you walk into the room, they have almost no information other than what you say about yourself. And maybe, if it's a more technical role, they can kind of quiz you on that and test your ability. If it's a role that's not as technical and it's more personality fit, all they can do is based on the face that you present, right there in front of them. So they're a little bit at a disadvantage, because when you walk into the building, you have a lot of information on this company. You can look them up online. You can hear about what their, other employees that have worked there. You're at the business itself, and you can see other employees working when you go to interview. Maybe this is before COVID, but you can, like you were saying, you can look them up on Glassdoor. And not only that, but you also have information, in a true free market, you have wage and benefit information. So you can see what similar companies are paying similar positions all around you, and make your decision based on that. Because those are signals and information that informs, whether this is a good company to work with or not. And you can also ask that company about those things. It seems only fair, that a company can try and get another point of information to validate what you were saying, what you were doing, whether you actually have the skill sets. And that's why they've got 3, right? They want to make sure that there's a little bit of corroboration between everyone's stories. Even with that, I don't think it's the same amount of information that you get when you walk into the business, because this business owner is not going to go walk to your house, right, and see how you keep it, or walk to your car and see how it's being taken care of, or anything like that. And so that's the natural balance, right? That's employees have a lot of power about where they can work. If they don't have a lot of skills, then yeah, you kind of are forced to take the only job that can hire you, and you are somewhat at the mercy of whoever will hire you. But that's the balance, right? That the better skills you are, the more unique skill you have, or the harder you're willing to work, the better job you're probably going to get. And the company has all the information there for you to verify if you so choose.
Yeah, and even if it's not in a verifying if you're a good or bad employee in terms of your work ethic and stuff, it's also just useful for an employer to know if you listed that I worked on this project in this major capacity. Sometimes they check with the employers to see, what was that project like? Are they exaggerating, or
Yeah.
what skill set does this person bring? And so this person in this post treats it very much like it's this pointless, not useful, almost accusatory thing, where yes, it is meant to verify to some degree, but it's also used in a way that just allows them to know the best ways to utilize people too, and to utilize their dog. If someone lists like, oh, I worked at this this company doing this job, and you call their employer and they're like, oh, they were here for so long, they were so loyal, they were like, there's a lot of things that you can't really put on your resume that can be communicated in those ways, that these kinds of references are great at demonstrating. I mean, you'd probably come off a little bit interesting, I would say, if you said something like very loyal to company, always very, loved by the upper management. And you can't list everything like that a reference can give you. And the biggest thing I can say is, if you don't want to give references, that's probably more on you than it is on the fact that references have to be given.
Exactly.
Okay, moving to our next post. This one reads, pilot shortage, teacher shortage, nurse shortage, service industry workers shortage. We're now seeing firsthand the jobs that really run our society. You know what we don't have a shortage of? Overpaid CEOs. Okay, well, the thing about this, there's a lot of angles to this one. The first thing that I just want to say is that all of these industries, pilots in the airline industry, teachers and the public school shutdowns, nursing and the, uh, policies about how many people you could have in certain distances, in the hospitals or whatever, and then service industry workers, all of these were completely upended and harassed and wrangled by the government in the COVID response. And so they talk about, look at all these shortages. And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, if any part of a society, if you all of a sudden said, oh, by the way, we're enacting a law where CEOs can't make any money and they can't make any stock options and they don't get any compensation. And so you had a bunch of CEOs quitting, you would also see a lot of disarray and dysfunction. The problem with this isn't so much that it's like, oh, look who really runs our society. It's that no, like an economy is made up of a bunch of moving parts and a bunch of moving pieces. And if the government sticks its hand in and prevents a good number of them from working, and so they leave and they stop, yeah, the economy's not going to function. In the same way that if you, I don't know, brought a guillotine out and killed all CEOs, a lot of companies would stop being productive and stop having long-term benefits and growth and function. So I don't, this person isn't making the point they think it is. I don't think any of us are saying, no, you don't need low, well, not even all of these are low skill necessarily. You don't need like frontline quote unquote workers to have an economy. You can just have CEOs. No one's saying that. But what we are saying is that, well, I mean, I'm not making a particular claim here, but what this person kind of assumes out of this argument is something that no one has made a claim of and no one has said. These people are important, but also the barrier to entry for them isn't the same barrier to entry that a CEO is. They're different skill sets, and some are more accessible than others. But what a CEO provides in terms of value is generally long-term sustaining growth, strategic resource management, things like that help preserve these entities in the long-term, big picture, so that you can have other pilots, other nurses, other teachers. I mean, teachers and not exactly, because there's not really a CEO, but if it was like a private school or something, but you can have these people functioning in and out, and you can have them filter, and the institution itself will still exist and be successful and beneficial to society.
Yeah, it was almost accidentally based to me in that, like, if you view you view there being a shortage because there's an imbalance in the market or something like that, then it's like, yeah, there are no overpaid CEOs because CEOs are paid exactly what they're supposed to be paid, right? Because of the value that they bring. So I was going to make fun of this person for that. But, what this, like you were saying, like CEOs have a totally different, any sort of executive has a totally different skill set that they bring to the table. I remember when I first got into the workforce, I reported to a director of sales and marketing, and he said, hey, like, normal employees, they looked at their day to day. A manager looks at, quarterly. And then maybe a little bit higher manager looks at like yearly. And then a director looks, 3 to 5 years. And then an executive is looking 5 years and beyond, usually up to 20 years for how a company is going to function. And so that's how they're measured. And so you look at these CEOs, like, I don't think anyone would, I mean, maybe there are some people. I think we had someone that said that Steve Jobs wasn't very remarkable, or maybe it was Elon Musk. He's not remarkable.
No, it was both, I think.
It was both. Yeah. But, those guys are remarkable, generated trillions of dollars worth of value, made everyone's lives a lot better. And they are billionaires because of it. And I don't think it would be really hard to argue for the fact that they don't deserve the money that they are paid, because it's a small fraction, right, of the value that they actually generate. And I know a lot of people don't have access to see like what it means to operate at that high level, but most of these folks that operate as an executive have some incredible mastery in some discipline other than management. I know a lot of folks say, well, CEO is just a glorified manager. It's like, well, no, a lot of them have some sort of background in accounting. A lot of them have a background in the actual technology that they are building or in the industry that they're doing. And they have a really huge track record of success. And because they have that huge track record of success and growing things and generating tons of value, they are entrusted with the entire results of the organization, because that's what a CEO is. It's like, hey, if this company makes $10 million this year, that's on the CEO. If the company loses $10 million, it's on the CEO, and they reap the consequences and rewards of both of those things. And yes, there's different externalities and weird things that happen and all that, but it's not an unskilled position. It's not like you could just put the fry cook at McDonald's into the corporate seat at McDonald's and everything would work great. Things would actually fall apart fairly quickly. They might last for 6 months to 8 months, but things crash pretty soon after that because, like I said, a CEO or executive level is looking to the future, and they're doing the smallest and tiniest little maneuvers to move the ship to where it's supposed to go. Because small little things move things, over a long period of time, have really drastic impact. And so, I don't think it's a coincidence that people that don't have a lot of time preference in their decisions are also very much unable to grasp why a CEO or an exec is really important to the life of a company. Those decisions over a long period of time really do add up and generate tons of value. And it requires a special type of person to foresee that and strategize around it.
I think a lot of attention is brought to the CEOs who maybe are overpaid in the sense that there's some tech bro who made some cryptocurrency that was very overvalued by people, and then he's on like pulled in a fire festival with friends, or he's like partying out with someone, and everyone's like, oh, look at this guy, he's wasting money, he's so overpaid, he's not doing anything. And then maybe he gets humbled, his company like suspends him, or
he's
whatever.
known as a scam artist.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the impression that these people get left in their mind. And then when they think about someone like who I'm trying to think of a great example of a very popular CEO who amongst the fan base was very loved. I think of Reggie Fils-Aimé, who was the former CEO of Nintendo of America. He was very, very front-facing with the fans. He was in a lot of the presentations. He helped a lot with the PR, the marketing and stuff. So he was very upfront, very connected. And the thing that people really loved about him was he wasn't sort of an imposter. He grew up with Nintendo games. He liked the stuff. He wasn't some corporate suit doing it, but he wasn't hired because of that. He recently wrote a book and that came out, and it was a really phenomenal book about business advice and the lessons and the principles he learned. And he's talking each step along the way of where he worked and how it helped him. He started he went to a prestigious school, and then he got hired at Procter and Gamble, and then he ran like the lead marketing stuff for Pizza Hut, and he had all this corporate experience that helped him. So he wasn't just hired because he was a cool gamer and he actually liked Nintendo games. It was that helped him be a good public face for the fans, but his skill set was in managing. It was in brand development. It was in long-term planning with all these things and he talks about all these different principles that he had to learn. And then furthermore, he talks about how it was a 24/7 job and for just stretches at the time, because you have to coordinate with Nintendo of Europe, coordinate with Nintendo of Japan, the parent company, so that you're at calls all times of the day. And if something happens on the weekend, it doesn't matter if you're on vacation. If there's a big PR faux pas, you have to be on that. You have to respond right away. And so not only is it these things like, well, CEOs are hired for skills and value, and it's very demonstrable even among someone who you like. He also talked about how it really is a 24/7 hour job for a big CEO of a big corporation and company. And so, yeah, there might be the tech bro who isn't really being paid what he's worth in a maybe a more realistic sense, but that is by and far the minority of the case. Those kinds of companies and those kinds of projects tend to fizzle out pretty quickly because they don't have good long-term leadership.
And they will never be a CEO or an executive ever again, because no one wants to trust them. There's a reason why executives kind of run the circuit and move to different companies and such, because they're trusted. They have a track record of, they show up at a company and that company is worth millions or billions more when they leave. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And if we knew exactly how to do that, if everyone knew how to do that, then yeah, we would have lots of value and no one would ever be complaining about anything. But in reality, that demonstrates that it is a special skill set, right? Like I can't with each individual CEO or executive, you can't describe what they necessarily bring to the table once they arrive there, because it's seen over a period of 5, 8, 10 years. And that's the overall goal. And most of their compensation, by the way, is tied to how the company performs. Yes, they have probably an average salary a lot bigger than their average worker. But like I said, that, like you were saying, that comes with the territory of like they work more hours too at the same time, and they have way significantly more consequences up to and including going to jail, depending on how they run things and do things. So everything is somewhat balanced there until the government gets involved, and then it becomes unbalanced.
Absolutely right. Okay, our next post comes from anti-work subreddit. Woo! With this is exactly it comment. And the post reads, I am not after the money. I am after the freedom that comes with having money. Two very different goals. Actually, no, not two very different goals. They're actually pretty similar goals. I don't think. I mean, it's such a dumb thing to say. Oh well, that person's just in it for the money. I'm in it for all the things that money can buy. that's kind of what this person's saying. Like, oh, you care about the dollar bills in your wallet. No, I don't care about that. I just want the food that when I give them the dollar bills. Like, no, that's the freedom that comes with having money is the sure, that's like why you tend to create and you want to create value, is so that you have that you can invest, and because you've produced something, you have that freedom. Again, if we take money out of the equation, if we take out the bartering aspect of it, the person who plants a single potato in the ground, and then he has to, and in this magic world, they grow one a day. He plants a single seed, and then he spends all his time on that one seed, and it grows a single potato, he eats it, and then he's got to do the same thing the next day, versus the guy who plants like an apple tree, and then he gets many apples and he can save them and he can refrigerate them, and then he's got 6 days off before he has to plant another tree. When you produce the value, then you get that freedom, you get that, and so it's not about accruing dollars or wealth for its own sake. I mean, that's a very like Scrooge McDuck cartoon version of what people are doing. It's about it. Everything that money is just a transfer of value. So
yes.
you're like, I'm not after the thing that represents value. I'm after value. It's like, yeah, that's why you get the thing that represents value.
Yeah, it's the Rick and Morty to mention the gimmick. It just sounds like going after value, but with extra steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this person, like if like you were saying, it's a store of value, and if they said something like, "Oh, I don't really like food. I just like not being hungry."
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like you're saying the same thing just with extra steps within it. I think this also kind of illustrates the broader lack of understanding that leads to leftists like this saying things like, "Oh, well, we're going to really sacrifice lives for COVID because we care so much about the economy." And it's like, what you don't realize is the economy is us. It's the ability for us to have value, and value being food, clothing, heat, cooling, a roof over our heads, all that medical care, all that stuff. Money, like they kind of, however, like you're saying, they separate. It's like, oh, well, money and being a capitalist and the economy is Scrooge McDuck diving into the pool. And, our needs are just there. It's like, no, like, money is just a great way for us to not have to figure out what the ratio of, chickens to 2x4 lumber is, right? Like no one, and it's really hard because it's like, well, there might be a lot of people that have chickens and not a lot of people that have lumber, and the lumber guy doesn't want any more chickens. So how are the people that have chickens going to get lumber? Well, it's like, well, it's a store of value that's transferable across all people, and we've all agreed that it's worth whatever it is. And there's been a lot of things that have been screwed up with that, but that's what money is. It's just, think about money as a stand-in for chickens or for lumber or for anything like that. And then you kind of realize it's like, oh, you would never tell people like, oh, well, you value people's, you value making food over people's lives, right? Like that's what people were basically saying during COVID. It's like, no, like if I don't make food, there is no food for people to eat to live. And now we're seeing, the repercussions of that with, how the economy is going right now. And I meant to mention this on the other one about money, but it's like, credit card balances in the past, 3 to 4 months have jumped 13% overall, right? I'm talking about the person that says, hey, we have a lack of service workers or whatever. It's like, well, Yeah, we have a lack of them, but it's because we bailed them out, right? We bailed them out. We gave them a bunch of money, and then we made credit easy, and that's why they're not returning to to work on and do stuff like that. And so that money that we gave them is fake value, right? You can't print chicken, you can't print 2x4s out of nothing like you can with money, and so. Yeah, I would hope this person would assemble those two things together, because if they do, they're going to have a lot better and more successful life. That makes a lot more sense.
I feel like I'm being distracted from the actual insightful comment that I could make about this by thinking of stupid things you could substitute in, like in your chicken and lumber. Like some guy who's a chicken farmer wants to build a new building. He's like, "Oh, I'm not raising more chickens because I want more chickens. I'm raising more chickens because I want the lumber that the chickens will get." Like, yeah. Oh, profound, dude. Yeah. Like, no one thought
you're not greedy at all. That's what makes it okay.
Like, oh my gosh, I thought you were a chicken farmer just for the love of chickens. It's like, well, okay, but
yeah, the love of chicken is the root of all evil.
Yeah, that's some translation of the Bible that I'm not familiar with. Okay, our next post here comes from Noah Bloom, not quite sure. Neon Taster on Twitter, and he's usually, I mean, like in the past, I've seen stuff from him that I really like, so I was a little bit annoyed to see this. So Edward Snowden originally had tweeted, he had this article and this talk about a new policy coming up, but he's talking about the primary result of the classification system is not an increase in national security, but a decrease in transparency. Without meaningful transparency, there's no accountability, and without accountability, there is no learning. And then he continues to this extra link or whatever, talking about, the need for transparency and how these classification systems aren't going to help that. And this comes right on the, he tweeted this, I think, 3 days, and then on this particular day, 3 days prior, and then on this particular day, the news about Edward Snowden being granted Russian citizenship was made public. And so then Noah quote retweets saying, "Congrats on your new citizenship," as if to undermine his point about security and transparency, because now he is a Russian national. And so obviously, because he's a Russian national, the entire time he was working for Putin, and he was not a US freedom fighter, but he was obviously an enemy spy and has defected and is evil. And what's so cringy about this to me is, like, look, Russia is not a great place in terms of their government and their citizenship. Like, I'm not a Putin apologist. I think Putin's a terrible, leader. I think they've done absolutely horrible things, especially like, assassinating other political party people. And so, like, the system there is not good. But how on earth are you supposed to take, like Snowden being granted Russian citizenship? How are you putting that on the feet of Snowden when you look at how the West has treated Assange? Assange was taken back, and he's been held in these awful conditions in his home country of the UK, and has not been allowed to speak publicly. You look at like Ross Ulbricht. You look at the ways that so Snowden escapes to a country that's willing to grant him citizenship so that he has some level of protection against the U.S. government and the West, broadly speaking, which has proven itself to be awful to whistleblowers. So yeah, Russia sucks. And being, if someone just defected in any situation without duress to being a Russian citizen, you might be like, that's a little weird. That seems sketchy. But like, of all people, I think Snowden probably has a pretty good reason to do so.
Yeah. I mean, Chuck Schumer himself said they've got 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. And he was talking about public figures, Snowden is now a public figure, but he was not when he initially released this stuff. So there is no way he was going to make it out unless he fled. It makes me think of, I remember talking with a buddy of mine. He used to work for the Department of Defense as a contractor, similar to Snowden. And I remember asking, I was like, what do you think about that? And he's like, yeah, they did all the stuff that he said they did, and what they did was wrong. And we definitely shouldn't have been letting that happen. But, Snowden and us, we all have kind of an unsaid vow, or I can't remember the words he said, to like not reveal that. Like, it's just not part of the culture. It's like, well, dude, that's a cult then. If you're saying that, it's like, you're doing something wrong, it's wrong. and you're afraid to speak out because you took some vow or there's some unspoken rule about not speaking out about that. It's like, that's a cult and that's wrong and you shouldn't be a part of that. And that's all the more reason for this thing, for the transparency to be, pulled wide open so we can all see what's going on.
Hey, Brett, that's the price you pay to live in a civilized society.
Democracy. Yeah. The price we pay, 24/7 surveillance of agents watching you with your spouse do stuff. No, I don't think there's a single person, like if they actually, looked at what Snowden revealed and all the different practices and metadata and the actual actions that they were using this data to do, would disagree that he was wrong for revealing it, right? Like I think even this Noam Bloom guy, it's like, yeah, the government probably shouldn't have that. I don't really like, unelected bureaucrats being able to access that. And then the people that they appoint to and hire to monitor this data to have access to it. And we've seen how they've abused it, right, in the past few years, not only just at the individual level, but all the way up to the public level with the elections, with what they're doing right now to Donald Trump and all of his supporters, and how Barack Obama weaponized the IRS against his conservative friends. So all these things, it's like, yeah, we know, Congress has a 17% approval rating. None of us trust them. We know they're collecting our data. It's a common thing for us to say things like, oh, well, don't say that around, Alexa, or don't say that around your iPhone because they're listening. Like, hi, FBI agent. Like, we all know they're doing it and we're all okay with it in some form or fashion. And we're not okay with it, but we just accept it. And we're mad that the reason we know about it, the guy that revealed it, is on the run and got citizenship in the only country that would probably take him, just so that he wouldn't get extradited back to the United States and, like you're saying, Julian Assange, killed or tortured or worse. It's like, yeah, you're going to get a fair trial back here. He's not.
No, of course not. It makes me think of, it makes me think like it gives the energy of, you're running away from, like from someone who's trying to rob you, and you run across the street that has that hand that says no crosswalking, and you're like, cop, there's a guy who's trying to rob me. And he's like, well, you jaywalked, so I mean, I don't really think you should have done. There's kind of the rules about not jaywalking, and you're like, dude, the guy is robbing me. That's a much bigger deal. And that's kind of how I feel with every single person who I'm ever talked to about about Snowden. They're like, well, he revealed it in ways that he shouldn't have done. And it's like, James Clapper testified before Congress saying that there was no spying apparatus. This man revealed that not only was there a spying apparatus, it was much broader than anyone in that year could have dreamed of.
And yeah, he gets to live here free and fine.
Right. Like, I don't get how people think this is remotely something worth it's not even comparable. Not even comparable to say that, well, he didn't reveal the information the right way. That's like incredible information to reveal. And so, this person, and to me, it's the exact same thing. It's very similar energy where it's like with this post where he's like, oh, congrats on your new Russian citizenship. It's like, the West and the US and the UK have been horrible to people like Julian Assange, to Ross Ulbricht, whomever it is. This man is going to take every level of defense. Well, he's defecting to the bad Russian people. Yeah, maybe because there's like a bomb in his backyard that he wants to get away from.
He has nothing to hide. He should have nothing to fear, though.
Yeah, right. It's extremely infuriating to see all of this. When it's like, in a vacuum, if no other facts existed, it might be weird that he got Russian citizenship. Yes, it's not weird when you look at the fact that there's a massive nuclear bomb in his backyard, basically. Okay, like, I don't know. It's just wrong priorities, all in all. So, okay, our next post reads, "Hey, guess what? Homeschool moms are real teachers. Pass it on." Based. And then there is a reply that reads, "No, being a professional teacher requires special skill sets that come with education, training, and in-class experience. Regardless, Homeschooling deprives your child of socialization skills they'll need as an adult, especially if they pursue a professional vocation. Okay, give me strength. This is extremely cringy because of so many things. The one that I just can't handle. I just have to take on out of order though. Is the socialization skills one, where it's just this freaking point that gets brought up over and over, and it's just so inaccurate. First and foremost, homeschooling deprives your child of socialization skills. Not necessarily. No, not any more than public school guarantees your kid is going to become a murderous psychopath. Both have tendencies. And so I would say, between the two, you're more likely to become antisocial if you're homeschooled than public school. You're also more likely to become a psychopathic killer at public school than homeschool. So, take your pick. But the thing is that the socialization skills that happen at public schools are often not good.
Yeah.
You don't get to, people will think this is a terrible thing to say, but it's not. You don't get to control who your kids are around in a public school. And that's a bad thing. In the same way that you should be monitoring, you should be censoring, you should be cultivating healthy environments for your kids. That includes people that they hang out with and things they're exposed to. And in a public school, you can't do that. You don't get to choose who your kid's around. So, the socialization happens in homeschooling through all kinds of homeschooling programs that I know you and I have both had, where we were interacting with people our age who are not outside of our family and even outside of our church groups, on pretty frequent basis, at least in my experience. But yeah, I mean, homeschooling could lead to deprives them of socialization skills, but the vast majority of cases do not. And I used to have better stats on this, but I want to say a study came out not that long ago, like in the last decade or so, that showed that on average, homeschoolers actually do better in social situations than public schoolers. And it's just one of those big misnomers that just goes around into sort of this urban legend.
What I love about this argument is that these people act like there are zero ill-socialized public school children.
Yeah.
It's like, no, there are plenty of, even if you set aside like the bad stuff that they learn because of the environment they're in, it's like, no, there are weird kids in public school. There are weird high schoolers, weird middle schoolers, all the way up and down the chain, because a lot has to do with family and environment and other things, right? So it's kind of silly for them to say that. And then you add in, like you were saying, all the bad stuff that they do learn. One of our favorites, Michael Malice, has the point that public school is one of the only places in modern society that you can live in and expect to encounter some form of violence. It's usually the only place that most people only ever encounter institutionalized violence against themselves. Whether it's a bully in the hallway. I remember there was a certain demographic at my public high school that if you're walking down the hallway, there was a good chance they were going to threaten you or push you into the wall or do different things like that. It's like, I've never encountered that anywhere other than when I was at the public high school. Even walking downtown Seattle, I don't encounter that I still fear it, but and I fear much worse in some ways, but I haven't encountered anything physical like that. The other aspect too, they're talking about like, oh, well, being a teacher requires special skills. It's like, no, the vast majority of stuff that's taught does not require special skills to teach. Maybe your weird little, whether it's a Common Core math or these weird educational methods that have never been used up until recently require some special skills. But that's being complicated for the sake of being complicated. If you've got a parent who knows their child, or you've got a little bit better classroom to teacher ratio, like in most homeschool co-ops, something like 5-1, things like that. You can actually tailor the educational course to the kids' needs, and that is more indicative of how they're going to learn and whether material is going to work well for them. And so, I think about my time. I did a mix of homeschool, some public school classes, some online school stuff. And when we had teachers at public school, it's like they just sat there, kids goofed off. If we had a really good one, they would try to lecture for about 10 minutes and that was it. And then maybe they give a test or something like that if it was on it. The rest of the time was free time for us to do whatever we wanted. These kids made a mockery of it. And I was like, man, if this is like, the one of the more average classes, like, we're doomed. These kids are dumb. And I was it was a recording arts class, and I was one of 2 kids that got a passing grade, out of 30. I was trying to think of the other thing I was going to mention. Oh, most of my friends growing up, I was able to start touring in a rock and roll band at age 16 around the country because I was homeschooled. That's pretty socialized for me to be able to go do that. My other friend at age 16 went to work as a software engineer at Microsoft. Another one of my friends was working professionally within the construction industry, owned his own business by the time he was 20, building $1 million buildings all around the county. So, the freedom that people have when your kid is allowed to learn the way that they are best able to learn, have the freedom to get up at 5 a.m. and complete all their assignments by 10 a.m. Like I would do, that leads to being a better professional, a better human being, more personal responsibility, and overall success in life. And yes, there are going to be weirdos, because that happens in any family that exists everywhere, whether you're public schooled or homeschooled.
Right. I do want to address the teaching bit that we were talking about earlier, because or that was in the earlier part that I didn't specifically respond to. The crazy thing about all of these specialized teaching things now more than ever is, it's like, if you're a parent and you're worried about teaching, or you're a parent and you want to teach, like most people who are going to homeschool, like, they're doing it not because they're lazy and they're like, oh, this is going to be so easy. They're doing it because they can, they care about their kid. They want to make sure that their kid's doing well, all these, things like that. And so, like, if their kid is struggling to learn, or they don't feel confident in teaching the materials, they can look that up now more than ever. The resources for that kind of thing don't have to be locked behind this paywall of a college education courses only. If anything, you could pay for an individual course in educational teaching. Like, maybe your kid has a learning disability or has some other sort of specific need that's going on. You can get the resources to learn to know how to adapt super easily now more than ever as a homeschooling parent. So even in their weird, barrier that they put up of, oh, you need these special skills. Okay, well, you can get them more than ever. And the vast majority of parents who want to homeschool will do that because they want to homeschool. They don't want to homeschool because they're like, oh yeah, this is going to make my life easy. Homeschooling is a really big commitment. It's a really big sacrifice, if you want to put it that way, from the world's perspective. And because you don't get your career, or however you want to define it. But all that being said, the point you make as well about the teaching class sizes and one-on-one parent, or 1-5 or whatever the teacher ratio is, that's the other aspect. Is that I feel like a lot of what's being taught in school settings is how to control a classroom, how to teach in ways that help the broad class learn. And that's all stuff you don't need to know when you have individual one-on-one instruction, or smaller, where you can address each kid individually. So a lot of these skills that they're referencing aren't even relevant in a homeschool scenario. So I don't know if you have any more on that. But
I think that, like you were saying, on top of that, there's the market has come to the aid of homeschoolers, in that there are tons of, like, you don't have to know these things because they've made curriculum for homeschoolers to work off of, right? Online stuff, books, all those things. So just reinforcing that, if you're on the fence about homeschooling, you would like to, because culturally and socially, you don't want your kids in that in the public school space, but you're a little bit concerned about whether you can actually provide a good education for them. Know that you can. Know that there's tons of resources out there. Know that it's pretty inexpensive, and in some states they'll even refund you for those education expenses, which is really, really awesome. And also know that there's a lot of new homeschoolers out there that are willing to partner up and figure that stuff out. So if you care about your kid, you want to homeschool them, there is no technical or financial reason not to. You can make it happen.
Well said. Okay, we're moving on. This is our last one here, I believe. And so we've got this post that reads, real entrepreneurs like strong regulation because it guarantees a level playing field on which they can compete, whilst keeping the charlatans, cheats, and tax abusers out of the market. It would seem the Tories do not understand real entrepreneurs. The Tories, of course, being sort of the right-wing, quote-unquote right-wing party in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. They're like Republicans. Some of them are good, but some of them are trash. And maybe it's because this person is from the UK, or maybe they are just insufferable. But just the way this was worded would make me cringe, even if I agreed with it. Like the keeping the, whilst keeping the charlatans, cheats, and tax abusers out. Like, come on, don't like speak like a normal human. Again, maybe
whilst.
Yeah, I know. Whilst that reeks of like 2013 Donnie.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe like 2011, 2012. Okay. So this, real entrepreneurs like strong regulation. Well, it's funny because in a way, this person isn't totally wrong. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs who like strong regulation because they feel like they have to, because they agree with this in sentiment and theory. But what the practical realities are is that the strong regulations end up hurting them, and then they complain about them down the road or later, or they've set up the very scenarios that lead them to wanting regulation. So obviously the point, the broader point that we can make here is that, well, the government is the one that's manipulating the market. The government's making the uneven playing field to begin with. So it's these regulations that, leave these businesses out. But if we're just going to sort of, take the reality as it is. Okay. So the government has caused upheaval, and the playing ground isn't even. Are entrepreneurs wanting regulation? Oftentimes, yeah, but they're misguided in doing so. The savvy business owners are the ones who recognize that the policies that they want will be the policies that end up harming them or other people down the road. In the same way where it's like, oh, this business license is a regulation is a really, really good idea. And I just think it's so terrible that there are these haircutting salons that are on the street and they don't have actually licensed haircutters. And so, people are putting themselves in dangerous situations. So we really want there to be a level playing field. Otherwise, these people are going to undercut me, and they don't know the business they're getting. On the one hand, maybe the entrepreneur wants that, but on the other hand, the new entrepreneur is like, wow, now I have to complete 300 hours of cost, 300 hours of training, and all because I have to get this license that says I can cut hair. So the people in the system want the regulation, right? Because it entrenches their power. They become the uneven playing field that they want to complain against, and new entrepreneurs are excluded out of the market. So to say that real entrepreneurs like strong regulation, yeah, a lot of them do, because the more regulation you put in that you already qualify for, that makes life better for you because there's less competition. But new entrepreneurs who are also very real don't like it, and ultimately you end up with this cake system of all these stupid regulations and requirements that kill new entrepreneurs and new business.
Yeah, I like your delineation about like his first phrase, because it's like, oh, this is almost accidentally based, because it's like, I wouldn't say real, I'd say the big and established entrepreneurs do love regulation because it keeps all of the little guys down, makes the barriers to entry really, really high. And I think about people, probably the first thing that comes to mind for most people is the minimum wage, with this regulation thing. And it's like, if you want to destroy the ability for new businesses to get off the ground, keep raising the minimum wage, because any sort of business that starts out is not going to make profit. They don't have any money that's coming in, but they have to pay people. And so sometimes, it makes sense to invest, right? Invest time. If you don't have money, invest expertise. And if you have money, invest that actual money into it to keep it going. But the more you force people to have to pay a certain floor, you actually limit the options that people can come up with to make things actually work as they come down the pipe. For me personally, I can think of an example of this. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I did a tech startup, ran it for about 3 or 4 years, and then we bootstrapped it. Basically put in almost $1 million into it altogether to make it happen. And then around 2020, we went looking for funding because we were ready to scale, trying to get because we need about $5-6 million to try and manufacture a bunch of stuff, get sales team set up, get everything ready to go. And we really did not want to go the traditional VC route because VCs, venture capitalists, are kind of evil. and they just want to turn and burn. They try and get your valuation up, then they try and kick you out so that you can't actually reap any of the rewards. Quickly found out, because we wanted to try and crowdfund it, quickly found out that there's regulation in place to help the little guy that says that unless you are an accredited investor, you can't invest more than, I think it's like $30,000 in a company, or you can't invest. If you're a company, you can't get more than 10 investors like in your company that aren't accredited. And so basically what happened is these VCs that have a lot of money, they said, okay, we're going to go to the government in the spirit of helping the little guy. We're going to pass regulation that the little guy can't actually invest in companies and their friends' companies, get friends and families to invest in their company. They have to go through us. So we get a piece of every single company that comes up through the woodwork. And so that way, if any of them do hit, if any of them do come up with a good idea, they have to have come through us because of the laws and regulation. Made it impossible for us to raise any sort of funding without basically getting a really, really bad loan for some rich guy. And so that's when you have regulation like this, the spirit of I want to help the little guy, even though it's named, maybe it's even named help the little guy bill. It never does that in the long run. It always hurts them. It always makes it more difficult. And like you were saying, it always entrenches the current power structure. And that's why companies like Amazon and I can't think of another one right now, but they're very much for, we want the $15 minimum wage. Their whole business model is based on being the low cost provider with very low margins. And if they had other competition entering the market and undercutting them, they would not be able to exist. And so the way they deal with that is making sure that there is a minimum wage so that it is not viable for a company to get started and scale up without losing a bunch of money.
That's exactly right. I honestly don't know if I have anything to add because I think you covered it great.
Oh,
but
thanks, man.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have any either. So
yeah, I think we're good. So the rare final cringe post, one comment each. Yeah. Well, thanks guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. Make sure to like and comment and all that stuff, and we'll catch you on the next one.